Fresh meat.
In the summer of 1975, a film so horrifying came out that it traumatized an entire generation. An unknown filmmaker took a popular novel and turned it into a film so scary that 2 single notes on a piano can invoke absolute terror. Jaws was such a big hit that it completely changed how films were released. There was no such thing as a summer blockbuster before the famous shark attacked Amity Island. Afterward, every studio wanted its own version of Jaws. Anything that could come out of the ocean and kill people was greenlit. Killer whales sought revenge in Orca. A mutated octopus caused havoc on a small seaside town in tentacles. And Robert Forster battled a giant alligator in the cleverly named Alligator. One person who had been cashing in on studio fads for decades was the king of the B-movies himself, Roger Corman. Seeing dollar signs, he wanted his own aquatic horror film. If one fish was scary, then a whole school of them had to be terrifying. He enlisted Joe Dante to make the film Piranha. As far as rip-offs of Jaws, it was one of the better ones and proved to be successful. Now, let's take a look at what exactly went wrong with Piranha II: The Spawning here on What the F*** Happened to This Horror Movie. I want to thank you guys for watching What the F*** Happened to This Horror Movie, and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show. Producer Ovidio G. Asonitis was no stranger to the Jaws ripoff subgenre. He had directed the previously mentioned Tentacles. Now, he was setting his sights on doing a follow-up to the Corman film Piranha. He was able to secure a small sum of money from a small label inside of Warner Brothers on the condition that the film had to be directed by an American director. Without hesitation, he agreed, and the film quickly moved into pre-production. Since the Corman crew had done so well on the first film, Asonitis hit up Miller Drake, who was Rogers' head of post-production. He began to think of ideas for the sequel. Would it be a brand new story or a direct sequel to the first film? Drake thought about bringing back Kevin McCarthy from the first film as a now mutilated Dr. Hope. He survived his meeting with the deadly piranha, but didn't make it out unscathed. Or he could also bring back Barbara Steele's character of Dr. Mengers. Before he could get too far into the process, Asonitis shut him down on all of his ideas. The two butted heads, and very quickly, Drake fell victim to the dreaded creative differences. Asonitis once again began to seek out a new director, and found him while watching Corman's Galaxy of Terror. The story goes that 2 producers were on set while some pickup shots were being done. One of them was a dismembered arm that was crawling with maggots. As they watched, the second unit director would yell, "Action!"
Strip it down and lay it underneath the arm, and we make it wet so that it'll conduct. And there's an electrician around behind the set, and the only cue I could think of was action, to tell him to throw the switch.
So you're going to shoot electricity into the arm, the worms, both?
Yeah, right, exactly.
They were amazed and started talking to him about other projects. This was just one of the small, innovative ways that director James Cameron would influence the world of film. With a new feature film job, Cameron began to write what would soon become Piranha II: The Spawning. In the film, we see that the military didn't just experiment on the fanged fish at the installation in the first movie. They had also been working on another version that includes DNA from all sorts of creatures. This new breed of fish can also fly.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Our lead, Anne, is teaching scuba classes at a fancy Caribbean resort. While out on a lesson, one of her students swims into a sunken ship, where she inexplicitly said not to go before they started. When she goes in after him, she finds his body has been chewed to shreds. After the sheriff takes the body to the morgue, she says she wants to see it, as it doesn't look like the bite marks of anything in the area that she is familiar with.
Studied marine biology before I met Steve.
We learn that the sheriff is actually her estranged husband, played by the always fantastic Lance Henriksen. Tyler, one of her students, seems interested in her, and she enlists his help to break into the morgue to see the body. They discover the badly chewed up body she is looking for, but they get interrupted by a late-night nurse. After they leave, a piranha chews its way out of the dead body and flies at the nurse. The scene is very reminiscent of a similar scene in Aliens with facehuggers. When she tries to tell the local hotel management about the strange bite marks and unknown cause of them, they think she's out of her mind. Of course, that means they refuse to shut down any of the beaches.
We've got a panic on our hands on the 4th of July.
And flying piranhas start to devour any hotel resident they can get their jaws on. The story is about as flimsy as you would think, but it still ends up being a pretty fun creature feature. When James Cameron arrived in Jamaica, ready to start filming, he was horrified to find that no one had scouted any locations. He grabbed the cash that the production had on hand and hired a local resident to drive him around. Doing this, he was able to secure many of the filming locations in the movie. They were all paid in cash and signed handwritten agreements. When that was done, Cameron started to make a lot of the special effects by hand. It looked like he'd be wearing many hats on this movie. When filming started, problems began to surface right away. The budget was reportedly supposed to be $500,000, but Lance Henriksen would later say the movie itself was shot for only $300,000, insinuating that the other $200,000 must have been lost by the producer. When they went to film the scene where Anne and Tyler break into the morgue, they showed up at the location and found that real bodies were inside. They included a small girl and another body of a man that had been cut open to perform an autopsy. They attempted to hide the bodies away the best they could, but actor Steve Marichuk decided to take a look. What he saw upset him so much that he had to leave the set for half an hour. Hearse drivers eventually showed up to take the bodies away, but as they were moving the body that had already been cut up, it fell off the table. Gallons of real blood spilled across the floor. Cameron himself cleaned it up so they could continue shooting. Lance Henriksen has talked about the shooting of the scene where his character jumps out of a helicopter into the ocean. He was hanging from the bottom of the helicopter, and Cameron was holding the camera shooting it. The helicopter was flown by a professional pilot. Before they rolled the camera, a boat had gone underneath the helicopter, and the pilot quickly moved it up to avoid a collision. This sudden jerk caused Cameron to drop the film camera into the ocean. It was never recovered. After a quick reset, Henriksen fell into the water for the scene, and the impact was so hard that it almost broke his arm. His boots began to fill up with water, and he was almost pulled down further into the ocean. He considered himself lucky not to have drowned. James Cameron thought everything had been going decently. There were a few hiccups, but nothing that they couldn't weather through. He was shocked when producer Ovidio G. Asonitis fired him off the film after only 5 days of filming. Asonitis would claim that Cameron was shooting stuff so poorly that it wouldn't edit together properly. He claimed that he had to restage some shots in order to get them correctly, which caused the schedule and budget to go over. Cameron left the project, and Asonitis took over directing the rest of the movie. It was later discovered that Asonitis purposefully had hired an inexperienced director so he could claim that they did a horrible job and fire them. He had wanted to direct the film himself and couldn't due to Warner Brothers' contractual stipulation that an American director had to be credited on the film. He dismissed Cameron, but left his name on the film to fulfill this obligation. Cameron didn't know that this was the reason until years later. He decided to keep working on the movie in post-production. Later, he would fly himself to Rome to see how the film was shaping up in editing. He saw what Asonitis was putting together and hated it. The film had been rewritten, and several shots of nudity that were not in the script had been added in. He would sneak in at night and recut the film. Asonitis finally discovered what Cameron was doing and again recut the film back to the way he had originally had it. While in Rome, Cameron had no money as he'd used it all just to get to Italy. Eventually, from exhaustion and malnutrition, he got sick. He had a fever and began to have horrible nightmares. In one of them, he dreamed of an explosion that revealed a metallic torso. It was dragging itself across the kitchen floor with kitchen knives. Would probably make a good movie. Hopefully, he makes it someday. Asonitis turned in his cut of Piranha II to Warner Brothers. They absolutely hated it and refused to release it. A much smaller company would release it a few years later. Their usual fare of releases was more of the adult kind, but took a chance on this film. As you can imagine, it flopped. Asonitis had claimed he was going to make a third entry into the series, but it never happened. Later on, Cameron was able to release a director's cut of the movie on Laserdisc, which was 20 minutes shorter and had some scenes edited together in a different order. It has yet to be released in any other format. Cameron, of course, would rebound to become one of the biggest directors in Hollywood. I'm sure he hasn't lost any sleep on his failed effort of his first directing gig and has stated that he considers The Terminator as his real first directing job. The Piranha franchise would live on, as in the 1990s, the first film was remade as a made-for-TV film, Piranha, starring William Catt. Then later, in 2010, it would be remade once again, but this time into a 3D film with Piranha 3D. The plot was only slightly similar, as it reimagined the fish as some prehistoric remnants that got set free from a locked-off underwater lake after an earthquake. It leaned into the absurd premise and became a fan favorite for its tone. That would be followed up with the similar tongue-in-cheek film Piranha 3 DD. Piranha 2 may not have lit the box office on fire, but it did give a Hollywood icon his start. Without this film, there may not have been a Terminator. Schwarzenegger may not have become a giant star. And then we wouldn't have the awesome film that is Commando. And what kind of world would that be? A bad one. Let's not imagine such a tragedy.
I lied.